In this video, we're going to be building a promotional email template. So if you open the example emails folder and then the Airbnb promo, you'll see what we're going to be building. Now if we make this slightly larger so we can actually see it, what we've got here is a header area, essentially with a logo, header and some text. And then what we're actually going to be building is how the experiences work sections here. So what we've got is a header, text, a 2-column layout, a divider, and then we're repeating those below. Okay, so let's open our email project in RapidWeaver and add a new stacks page. We'll call this Promotional. And we'll, first of all, or what we'll do before we do anything else, is add the style stack to the page. We're going to get that warning again, so we need to open the page inspector and go through the checklist here. So we've already set the email theme, we've disabled the advanced settings, but we do need to set a title and a slogan. So we'll go to the general settings, we'll set the title to be Promotional Email, and then we'll set the slogan to be a test promotional email. Again, you want to set these to something more appropriate to your project. What I'm also going to do is update the folder name. So I'm just going to call this Promotional. And again, this is going to come in handy when we export the email templates later on in the course. Okay, back to the checklist and we can check those off. We've also set the web address and we're only going to use email stacks. Okay, so first of all what we need is a wrapper stack. And then we want a 1-column stack with our logo image inside. Again, you could browse for that image, but what we're going to do is just drag and drop in one from the general folder here. And then we need to set the image size. So we always need to specify this correctly. And in our case, we're going to have 50 by 50. So 50 pixels by 50 pixels. Then below the image, what we want to have is a header. And then we want some text. Okay, if we preview this in the browser, there we can see we're starting to build up what we want, but I do feel that the default spacing or the default padding inside of email stacks is a little bit tight. So I'm going to go into the style stack and update those. So back to RapidWeaver, and if we choose the style stack here, on the background and spacing settings, what I'm going to first do is update the sizing. So this is the maximum size that the email will be on a desktop, for example, or in a general email client. And that is by default set to 600 pixels. If you're on a phone, it will take up the full width of the device. So you can update that here. So the sizing on the left here is in pixels and the smaller sizing is in percentage. So what we want to do is have 720 pixels, and you'll see that the preview here got wider. And then we're going to go into the advanced settings here. I'm going to update the global margin to be 20 pixels, then I'm going to set the gutter to be 40 and the padding to be 20. Okay, if we go back to Safari and preview that, you'll see that the width got wider there, and we also have a little bit more padding on the left and the right hand sides. What we do need to do though is add some padding to the top of this wrapper. So we'll go to RapidWeaver and we need to do that on the wrapper here. We'll click the plus button and we'll set the padding top to be 20 pixels. Now when we go back to preview, you'll see that the top and the left hand sides are equal, and that looks a lot nicer. And one thing to note here is when you update the style sizing or the sizing inside of the style stack, that's going to be applied to all of the elements on the page. You can do it individually as we did in the previous videos, but I would suggest trying to do that globally inside of the style stack where possible. Okay, next up what we want is, if we go to preview, we are going to be building up this area here. So we've got a header and some text. What we then want is a 2-column layout with a bit of text in below and then a divider. So we'll go back to RapidWeaver, and what we want there is the 2-column layout in below there. And then each column had an image, and then it had some text, and what we're going to use is a header, or 2 headers actually. So I'm going to duplicate that into here. So firstly, let's go and set up our image. Again, we are going to drag and drop one from our assets folder. Inside of photos, we will select city 1 and we'll drop that into there. Now what I do need to do is check the sizing for this image, and it is 552 by 828. So again, as I mentioned previously, we're going to be using half of this size so the image looks sharp on Retina devices. So that will be 226 by 414. So 226 by 414. And then below there we had a subheader. So if you have a look in preview and we close out that image, you'll see we essentially have an uppercase subheader and then a main header below that. So what we're going to use on the type for this header is an H6. We will leave the sizing as it is for now, but we will collapse the margin, and then on the one below we're going to make this a bit smaller. We'll say an H4. Okay, and then we'll just update the text here. We'll say a subheader, and then in here we'll just say the main header about this image, like so. Okay, so let's duplicate that into the right hand side, like so, and then go back to preview, and there you can see that we're starting to build up that same layout as the preview. Now the headers look a little bit large, so I think we're going to use some custom sizing here. So back to Rapid Weaver, and then on the subheader here, now what we can do is actually use the custom sizing, or I believe if we go to the style stack here, we can set the text sizing here. So we're using an H6. We actually want this to be 14 pixels on all devices. So we'll set 14 there, and you'll see that that gets updated below. What we are going to do though is change the color scheme here. So we could use alternate. So if we go and change the alternate heading styles here, so by default it's white. What we might want is a light grey color, something like that. Or actually let's use a little bit of color. Let's use this blue color here, just as an example. If we change the color scheme to be alternate now, that seems to have set it to white, so I think I might have changed the colors wrong. No, that is correct. Maybe the preview doesn't update. Let's just set that to be alternate as well, and then preview in the browser, and yep, there we can see that the light blue color has been applied. Now that doesn't really match with the green, so maybe we want that to be a light green color instead. So to do that, we would just come back to the site styles, and we would update this to be a kind of light green color, something like that will do. If we go back and refresh the preview, there we can see that's been updated. Next, I still think that the sizing for this header is a little bit large, so again we'll come down, and for this we were using an H4. So on the styles stack we will change the H4 sizing. We might only want this to be 20 pixels for example, and then that would mean that we want to reduce the sizing of the H5, so that might be 18, like so. And then we'll go back and preview that, and that's looking a little bit better. So what we notice here is that the images here don't line up with the one column stack above, and that's because we've got additional padding here. So we'll need to actually change some of these settings. So if we go back to Rapid Weaver and the style stack, I believe that we might need to set the column gutter to be 20 pixels instead. So if we do that and refresh, nope, that's not lining up correctly, and I still want that to be 40, so we'll change that. We might need to set the padding to be 40 as well. Let's have a look what that does, and that just adds it to the bottom. Okay, so I think we're going to have to do some custom padding or sizing on this two column stack below. So what we might want to do here is on the layout, or actually what we're going to want to do is on the one column stack, we're going to want to do some custom spacing. So on the left, we're going to want to set this to 20 and also 20 on the right. And that will add the additional 20 pixels padding to the left and right so that all the content lines up nicely. Sorry, what we want to do is set this to be 40 and 40, and then that should line up nicely. Yeah, What we've done here is added some additional padding to the one column stack above so that all of our content lines up nicely. Okay, having done that, let's just go back to preview and check what we're actually building here. So we have essentially the same layout. What we want to do now is add a divider and then another section below. So let's go ahead and do that. So we will use the divider stack in below the 2-column stack here. And then we will duplicate this 2-column stack in below, and we will update the images now. So select the image here, open up your assets folder, go to general, we'll select city 2 and we'll drop that in, and then we'll do the same for the other 2 images as well. Like so. Okay, so if we go and preview that and have a look, what you might have noticed that I've done is drop the divider in directly below the 2-column stack. So we're going to need to fix that. What we want to do is have a 1-column stack with the same setting as this one. So what we could do is either copy that, or we can just drag and drop a 1-column stack in, drop the divider into there, and then we need to do some custom spacing. So I'm going to set all of these to be 20, or sorry, I'm going to set the top and the bottom to be 20, and then the left to be 40 and the right to be 40 as well. Then when we preview that, you'll see that that then lines up nicely on the left and right. However, we are getting quite a lot of spacing in below here. So what we'll need to do is remove the padding or the margin from the 2-column layout here. So back to RapidWeaver. And then firstly I'm going to collapse the margin on these headers. Then on the 2-column stack I'm going to define some custom spacing. So on the top and the bottom, or sorry, on the top that should be 20, and on the bottom we'll set that to 0. Then if we go and preview that and refresh, you'll see that's moved up and that's looking a lot better. Okay, if we go to preview and have a look at our email that we are designing, you'll see that each one of these images has a rounded corner. Now that isn't an option inside of RapidWeaver here, so there is no option to say that we want rounded corners on this image. Now the reason that there isn't an option to do this is because rounded corners are often done using CSS. However, CSS support in email clients differs widely. So some email clients such as Mail on Mac or your iPhone supports CSS pretty well. So you could do a border radius CSS class for all of your images, and it would show up, it would be rounded on all of your Apple devices. However, if you look at that on perhaps an older Windows machine, the CSS that you've applied wouldn't actually be shown on that email client. So depending on your target audience, you have a couple of different options. The first option is to create these images with rounded corners, and then obviously everyone that gets the email would see the image with rounded corners. Your second option is to do this in CSS anyway, and that's the option that we're going to take. So I know that when I send out emails, 99.9% of our user base is on an Apple device. Therefore I know that they're going to be using a pretty modern email client and the CSS is going to be applied. So as I say, what I'm going to do is set a custom class for this template and set the image border radius to be, say, 5 pixels. So to do that, what we're going to do is go to Safari, and on the preview I'm going to inspect the code behind this page. Now you can right click and inspect element here. However, if you don't have that available, what you'll need to do is open the Safari preferences, go to the Advanced tab and then Show Develop menu in menu bar. That will give you this develop menu here with the developer tools. Once you've done that, right click on one of your emails and inspect element. That will then give you the code behind this page and specifically the code for the element that you selected. And here we can see that the images are placed inside of a table with a class of image. So what we're going to do is set up an image class that targets these images here. So let's go back to RapidWeaver, and then in the header tab here we're going to select the CSS tab, and then we're going to say .image and then img. So this is essentially saying any image inside of the image class should have a border radius of 3 pixels, like so. Now when we go back and preview that, you'll see that now all of our images have a 3 pixel border radius. So if you want to do something like that, you can. As I say, it's going to depend on your target audience whether you feel that CSS should be applied or not. If CSS isn't supported on the email client, they would just get the standard square corners, so this border radius wouldn't be applied on that email client. Now one thing I have noticed here is that the bottom of the images aren't being rounded, so let's just inspect that element again and we'll have a look, and it seems like there's some padding being applied to the bottom here, like so. Okay, so if we remove that padding we get the rounded corners. So let's have a look at fixing that in RapidWeaver. So the first option to do this would be to collapse the margin for each one of these images. If we do that and refresh, we'll see that, yeah, the top images where I've collapsed the margin, they get the rounded corners. However, the bottom ones don't, but they do get the spacing. So again, we're going to have a couple of options to fix this issue. Now the top images look good, but we need to add spacing. So to do that, what we could do is in our CSS class, we could add a margin bottom rule and say 10 pixels. So we could do that. However, what we're going to do is use the email stacks. So the stack we're going to use is the spacer stack. So we'll drag and drop that in below there, and we'll set this to be 10 pixels. Whoops. Like so. And then I'll copy that over into here. And then what we want to do is collapse the margin on these two images and copy the spacer stack in below here. Now when we go and preview, you'll see that we have rounded corners on all of the images, but we also have that spacer as well. Okay, next up, I have also noticed that this divider is actually wider than the content is here. Now that is because we've set the content or the overall width of this email to be too wide. So the actual content width of the email is where this divider goes to, but our images are stopping short of that. So we'll probably want to reduce the overall width by about 20 or so pixels. So let's go to RapidWeaver and go to our style stack. And I think we actually might want 680. So let's set that and then refresh. And then yeah, that's looking a lot better. Our our images are lining up with our divider there. And yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, next if we go back to our email that we are working on, we'll have a look. Essentially we have the same layout here. We have a 2-column layout with images and titles, so we're not going to duplicate any more of those. But what we do have is another divider with a little footer area in the bottom here. So we'll have a look at creating this now. So back to RapidWeaver, scroll down to the bottom, and what we want is a 1-column stack in below there. Then we'll want a divider, and then we want some text. So if we preview that and scroll down, there we can see that we have the divider at the bottom with our text, but it's not lining up with the rest of our content. And that's because we need to apply the same padding as the header area here. And if you remember, we set that to 40 on the left and 40 on the right. What we might want to do is round this up to be 20 so that everything kind of matches up. So we're 20, 20, 40, 40. So if we set that on the footer one as well, like so, we should see that our content is lining up nicely. Yeah. So all we need to do is update the styling of the footer text here. And what I'll also do is just enter some more appropriate text. Okay, and then what we want to do is set the styling. So the color scheme we want if we set that to alternate, we're going to get white text, and that's because we haven't actually set up the text alternate color. So what we could do is go into here on the text, we could set this to be a light gray, and you'll see that updates there. We might want something a little bit lighter, say like that. Then when we go down, you'll see that that alternate color has been applied there. And then what we might want to do is set a custom sizing. So what we want is perhaps just 14 pixels as the sizing, and we'll leave the alignment to be left, but we do want to collapse the margin, and that's because we don't have any content below this text, so we don't need to add any additional space below here. Okay, so if we go and preview that, now you can see we get that nice footer area here. Now one thing you'll notice is that I've added an unsubscribe piece of text. Now later on in the course, when we export these emails, we're going to be looking at how we actually integrate an unsubscribe link from the email service we're using. I've just put this in as a placeholder for now. As I say, later on in the course, you'll find out how you actually add the unsubscribe link to your templates. Okay, with that being done, I think this is looking pretty good. We've got our logo with the header at the top and some text. Then we've got the 2-column layouts with the rounded corners. We've updated the alternate colors and the sizing of all the headers and stuff like that. So yeah, this is looking pretty good. The only thing I think that could look a little bit nicer is that these headers look a little bit dark. If we look at the promotional email that we were working on, you'll see that it's a slightly lighter grey, and the sizing and colouring is a little bit nicer on this email. So we'll have a look at how we could update that quickly before we finish up. So back to RapidWeaver. Then in the styles stack, we will set the header colour to be a slightly lighter grey. We'll also update the text to be the same colour. And then we'll scroll down, and what I'm going to do is set the paragraph sizing to be the same as the H5 sizing. So we're going to update this to be 18 pixels. Then when we go back and preview that, I think that looks a little bit nicer. We could perhaps have a slightly lighter grey. So let's just do that quickly. Like so. We'll refresh, and yeah, that's looking a little bit nicer. I'll let you play around with the styling for your email. I just want to show you how you can preview and update the email styles easily for your templates. Okay, with that being done, let's move on to the next email template.